Julia Roberts stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes filled with tears. And a name called from the back corner of the studio changed everything. It was a Tuesday night in March 2024. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Studios 6A at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Julia Roberts was promoting her new film, another charming interview, another round of stories that would make America laugh before bed. Everything was going exactly as planned. Jimmy had just asked her about working with her co-star. A simple question. An easy setup for a funny anecdote. Julia was mid-answer, gesturing with her hands the way she always did when telling a good story, that famous smile lighting up the studio. So we're on set in Atlanta and my co-star, who shall remain nameless, decides that the best way to prepare for this dramatic scene is to... And then someone in the audience said a name. Not loudly. Not a shout. Just a name, spoken clearly from somewhere in the back rows of the studio audience. A woman's voice. Steady and certain. Daniel Moder. Julia's hands froze mid-gesture. Her smile vanished. Her entire body went rigid in the guest chair. Jimmy noticed immediately. His professional instincts kicked in. Something was wrong. Julia? You okay? Julia didn't respond. She was staring past the cameras, past the lights, toward the back corner of the studio where the audience seating faded into shadow. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her eyes, moments ago bright with laughter, were suddenly brimming with tears. The audience felt the shift. 300 people who had been laughing seconds ago fell into confused silence. The Roots stopped their gentle background music. Questlove lowered his drumsticks. Jimmy stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. Julia? Jimmy said again, leaning forward across his desk, genuine concern replacing his host persona. What's happening? Do you need that name? Julia whispered, her voice cracking. Who said that name? The control room erupted. Director Dave Diamadi was frantically speaking into headsets. What just happened? Did someone from the audience yell something? Do we cut to commercial? Executive producer Katie Hockmeyer stood behind Dave, watching the monitors intently. No. Keep rolling. Something real is happening. On stage, Jimmy had stood up from his desk, something he rarely did during interviews unless it was planned. He walked around to Julia's side, his blue note cards forgotten, scattered across his desk. Julia, talk to me, he said quietly, crouching beside her chair so the cameras wouldn't catch his full reaction. What's going on? Julia's hands were trembling. She looked at Jimmy, then back toward that corner of the audience. My husband's name. Someone just said my husband's name. Daniel Moder. Jimmy's eyes widened. He glanced toward the audience, trying to locate whoever had spoken. I didn't hear anyone say anything. Are you sure? I heard it, Julia said, her voice stronger now but thick with emotion. Clear as anything. A woman's voice. From back there. She pointed toward the rear left section of the studio. Jimmy straightened up and addressed the audience directly, breaking every protocol of how interviews were supposed to flow. Folks, did someone say something? Did anyone hear someone call out a name? The audience members looked at each other, confused. Head shaking. Murmurs of no and I didn't hear anything. But in the back left corner, in the last row where the studio lights didn't quite reach, a woman in her 60s sat perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face was wet with tears. And she was staring directly at Julia Roberts with an expression that somehow combined grief and gratitude in equal measure. Julia saw her. Their eyes locked across 50 feet of studio space. Oh my God! Julia breathed. It's her. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 15 years earlier. Julia Roberts wasn't just a movie star. She was America's sweetheart, the woman with the megawatt smile who made romantic comedies into cultural events. But in 2002, she'd stepped back from the constant grind of Hollywood to focus on her family. She'd married cinematographer Daniel Moder in 2002, had 3 children, and built a life that valued privacy over premieres. Daniel was her anchor. The man who kept her grounded when the fame got overwhelming, who made her laugh when the pressure mounted, who reminded her that she was Julia, not Julia Roberts the icon, but Julia the person. They lived in Malibu, raised their kids away from cameras, made a life that felt normal despite the impossible abnormality of her fame. In June 2009, they were driving back from a dinner in Santa Monica, Pacific Coast Highway. Late evening. Daniel was driving. Julia was in the passenger seat, their fingers intertwined on the center console the way they always were when they drove together. A car ran a red light at the intersection of PCH and Topanga Canyon Boulevard. The crash was catastrophic. Julia survived with a broken collarbone and lacerations. Daniel suffered severe head trauma. He was airlifted to UCLA Medical Center where doctors fought for 18 hours to save his life. Julia sat in that hospital waiting room, still wearing her blood-stained dress from dinner, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. She made bargains. She made promises. She begged the universe to not take the only man who'd ever made her feel like herself. Daniel survived. But the recovery was brutal. 3 surgeries, months of rehabilitation, permanent damage to his short-term memory, chronic migraines that left him bedridden for days at a time. The woman who had been driving the other car, Sarah McKenzie, a 58-year-old real estate agent from Woodland Hills, survived too. She'd been texting while driving. She admitted it to police immediately, devastated by what she'd done. Julia never pressed charges beyond what the state pursued. Sarah lost her license, paid enormous fines, did community service. But the legal system couldn't address the real debt. The life she'd nearly taken, the trauma she'd inflicted, the permanent damage she'd caused. Sarah McKenzie tried to reach out to Julia. Letters sent to agents. Emails that never got responses. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to somehow make amends for the worst mistake of her life. But Julia's team filtered everything. Protected her. Kept Sarah's attempts at contact from ever reaching her. For 15 years, Sarah carried that guilt. She quit her job. She couldn't drive anymore. The thought of getting behind a wheel made her physically ill. She volunteered at brain injury support groups, trying to pour her remorse into helping others. She attended therapy. She tried to forgive herself and failed every single day. 3 months ago, Sarah's daughter surprised her with tickets to The Tonight Show. "Mom, you need to do something for yourself. Just one night. Just laugh." Sarah almost said no. But her daughter insisted. And when she looked at the guest list and saw Julia Roberts' name, something inside her made a decision. This wasn't about redemption. This wasn't about forgiveness. This was about finally saying the words she needed to say for 15 years. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Jimmy was standing center stage now, looking between Julia in the guest chair and the woman in the back row. The cameras were trained on both of them. The audience sat in absolute silence, sensing they were witnessing something profound but not understanding what. "Ma'am," Jimmy called out to the woman in the back, his voice gentle. "Did you say something?" Sarah McKenzie stood slowly. Her legs were shaking. Every person in the studio turned to look at her. "I said Daniel Motor," she said, her voice carrying through the studio with surprising strength. "Because I'm the person who almost killed him," the audience gasped. Julia's hand flew to her mouth. Jimmy's eyes went wide. 15 years ago, Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face. "I was texting while driving on Pacific Coast Highway. I ran a red light. I crashed into their car. I nearly killed Julia Roberts' husband. And I've tried for 15 years to tell her how sorry I am." The studio was completely silent. Even the production crew had stopped moving. Every camera was recording. Every microphone was live. Julia stood up from the guest chair. Slowly. Her legs seemed uncertain. She took 2 steps toward the edge of the stage, staring at Sarah. "You," Julia said, her voice barely audible. You're her. The woman from the crash. Yes, Sarah said. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've wanted to tell you for 15 years. I've wanted to explain that I think about Daniel every single day. I've wanted you to know that Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. Julia was walking. Off the stage. Down the steps. Through the audience aisle. Directly towards Sarah McKenzie. The cameraman scrambled to follow her. Katie Hockmeyer in the control room was shouting, "Stay with her! Stay with her!" Jimmy stood on stage, frozen, watching this unfold. Julia reached the back row. She stood face to face with the woman who had nearly destroyed her life 15 years ago. You tried to contact me, Julia said. It wasn't a question. So many times, Sarah whispered. I wanted to tell you how sorry I was. How I live with it every day. Julia held up her hand. Sarah stopped talking. Daniel lives with chronic pain, Julia said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. He gets migraines that leave him unable to work for days. He has memory issues. Our children have had to learn to be patient when their father forgets things he told them yesterday. Sarah's face crumpled. I know. I'm so sorry. I would give anything to take it back. But he's alive, Julia continued. He's alive and he's my husband and he's their father. And for 15 years, I've carried anger at you. I've imagined what I would say if I ever saw you. I've rehearsed speeches about what you took from us. The audience was crying. Jimmy was crying. The cameras stayed locked on Julia and Sarah. Julia reached into her jacket pocket, the same elegant blazer she'd been wearing for the interview, and pulled out a small photograph. She held it up so Sarah could see it. The image showed Daniel Motor smiling at the camera, his arms around their 3 children, taken just last month. This, Julia said, is the man you didn't kill. This is the life that survived. And I think I need to stop being angry about what you almost destroyed and start being grateful for what remains. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Julia Roberts pulled Sarah McKenzie into an embrace. The audience erupted, not in applause yet, but in that collective sob that happens when hundreds of people witness something sacred. Sarah collapsed into Julia's arms, 15 years of guilt finally finding somewhere to land. Jimmy walked down from the stage, tears streaming down his face. He stood a few feet away, bearing witness, not interfering. When they finally pulled apart, Julia kept holding Sarah's hands. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah McKenzie. Sarah, I forgive you. Daniel forgives you. He told me years ago he'd forgiven you, but I wasn't ready to hear it. And I need you to forgive yourself. Sarah shook her head. I don't know if I can. Julia pulled the photograph from her pocket again and pressed it into Sarah's hands. Then carry this. Look at it when the guilt gets too heavy. Remember that this family exists. That Daniel is in this picture. That we're okay. Sarah clutched the photograph, sobbing. Thank you. Thank you. Julia turned to the audience, to the cameras, to America watching from home. 15 years ago, someone made a terrible mistake that hurt my family. But hate didn't heal my husband. Anger didn't fix his memory. Forgiveness is the only thing that gives us both peace. The audience rose. Standing ovation. Not the excited applause of entertainment, but the reverent applause of people honoring courage and forgiveness witnessed in real time. Jimmy helped both women back to the stage. Sarah sat in the guest chair beside Julia. They held hands while Jimmy, wiping his eyes, asked Sarah about her journey. About the 15 years of guilt. About what forgiveness felt like when it finally came. The interview that was supposed to be about a movie became about something infinitely more important. The segment ran 20 minutes over. Nobody cared. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the show, Julia had the photograph she'd given Sarah professionally duplicated. She sent the original to Sarah with a note. For the days when you forget you're forgiven. Sarah framed it. It sits on her mantel next to a photo of her daughter, the girl who bought Tonight Show tickets and unknowingly orchestrated a miracle. Julia still carries a copy of that photograph. She says it reminds her that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing we can do.